My name is Nikolai and I went from 0 to 15 million euros in just 2.5 years. In this video, I'll show you exactly how. For almost as long as I can remember, I've known that I had to crack the code on how to earn money. And in recent years I did. It has enabled me to live in my dream apartment, travel the world and provide for the people I love. But I'm not making this video to brag about any of my accomplishments. In fact, I hate talking about my numbers, showing off Shopify screenshots and the like, as I feel it often comes off as quite arrogant, especially for people who don't know me. But I think my story can hopefully be an important one for young people who have the same dream I had. The road to success is rarely linear, and mine has been far from smooth sailing. I've had many failures along the way, but if my experiences can help you in any way on your entrepreneurial journey, then my job is done. I grew up in Denmark in quite a small rural town. My first venture into the world of entrepreneuring came many years ago when I was still in primary school. It was a clothing brand that I had started with my mom. After having taught myself Photoshop, I designed a few t-shirts and hoodies that my friend who had a camera would then take pictures of. It never really took off, but that didn't discourage me. Quite the contrary, in fact. It made me realize that I still needed to succeed in making money somehow. So not long after having shut down the clothing business, I came across a few videos on YouTube about day trading. I decided to give it a shot even though I had no experience and barely any money to trade for. And the fact that I had no money made each trade feel like life and death. I would lose 30 euros and feel like the world was ending. And then a few days later, I would win 50 euros and get the most euphoric feeling in the world. It was quite a tumultuous time, but it taught me that I couldn't afford to let my emotions control my actions. After having day traded for a while without any huge losses or gains, I started high school. In high school, I met a guy who was quite good at coding, and together we created a platform that compared car prices. At that time, there was another big platform in Denmark that did a way better job than we did. So we reached out to them and they let us work there during the summer so that we could learn from them. Honestly, I don't think they had any real use for us, but they just wanted to acknowledge our drive and ambition, which was nice. However, after having worked there for most of the summer, I realized that working under someone was something that I could never do. I deeply wanted to be my own boss, so my friend and I quit, and not long after we created a marketing agency that did Google advertising for other companies. We actually only had that project for a few months and that never really took off either. So before I knew it, I was in my senior year back at square one without any money. But with that said, I actually never had the feeling of losing, even though my ventures didn't perform as I wanted. And looking back, I think that's one of the most important lessons, because if you always continue pushing, learning and trying new stuff, no matter what, you will succeed at some point. And so this was actually the time when COVID hit and we were sent home from high school. I suddenly had a lot of extra time on my hands and I used it to research, using mostly YouTube once again. I came across a video with a young guy who had made over $100,000 with e-commerce and dropshipping, and that is what initially sparked my interest in e-commerce. Hopefully just like you've come across this video. I would spend week in and week out watching and learning about the business model. Videos on how to run ads, how to build a Shopify store, product research and so on. I saw a video with someone who had made a print-on-demand company, so I decided that was what I wanted to be my next project. I had some Photoshop skills from the clothing company I had, but it wasn't great by any means. So I spent a few days enhancing my skills. Then I decided inspirational canvas prints like the brand Iconic, and then found a company in the US who could print them. My brand here was called Knowledge Canvas. I started advertising my brand on Instagram through theme pages, but I made 0 sales, so I had to try a different strategy. I started researching about Facebook ads, and after a month I was finally ready to launch my first paid advertisement ever. I set the daily ad spend to 25 euros and I had about 500 euros in total to my name, so I knew I had to make it work this time. After that I would be done. I would have nothing left if I couldn't make it work this time. The days went by. no sales. I then gradually turned up the daily ad spend and it ended up being about 65 euros a day. At this point, I had spent half my budget with 0 sales and I started to lose hope. But I always kept telling myself that if the people on YouTube could make it work, then surely I could as well. And this is actually another crucial lesson I want to emphasize, because the people succeeding with entrepreneurship aren't necessarily smarter than you. Often all it comes down to is taking action. And as I wrote on my product from Knowledge Canvas, hard work beats talent every single time. And so I decided to let the ads run for a few more days. But the days kept going by, still no sales. I nearly spent all my budget when it finally happened. I got my first ever Shopify notification on my phone, which told me that someone named Susan from Arizona had just spent $135 on a canvas from my shop. I was ecstatic, and all the hope that I had lost was returned to me. So I kept turning up the ad campaign budgets and the sales followed. And for the first time in my entrepreneur journey, I started to make a profit. With that said, I always kept researching and learning how to optimize and tweak my store. And after about 3 months, I had made over 20,000 euros in revenue. The people around me started noticing, and I even had an article written about me in the local newspaper. I honestly thought I had finally made it, but after a while, the store started plateauing. I couldn't really scale it further, and the profits were minimal. I realized that this store wasn't what was gonna bring me to the heights that I was dreaming about. I started having a bunch of doubts and contemplating myself whether it was even worth it. Because honestly, I had spent all my time and money during high school on my companies. I couldn't afford new clothes or going out. In fact, I really rarely went out during those years. And I remember a specific episode where a good friend of mine had a birthday party. There was a small entrance fee that I simply couldn't afford. I ended up telling him that I had to go to some family get-together and that I unfortunately couldn't attend, which obviously was a lie, but I was just too embarrassed telling that I didn't have any money for it. But during that period, I was just at home working relentlessly. And there were so many episodes like these. But every time I had to cancel plans or avoid going out, it reaffirmed that I just had to make it work. After graduating in high school, I took a break of a few months for the first time in years, and I spent that time having fun and attending graduation parties as we do in Denmark. But more so than anything, I was reflecting on my journey and my goals. I had a friend who had found some success doing Facebook advertising for other e-commerce brands, and one day I took a deeper look at some of the e-commerce stores that he was performing on. And I realized that all of the well-performing e-commerce stores were providing some sort of value to the customers. It wasn't just those typical dropshipping stores scamming people. Because the fact of the matter is that you can create the most well thought out and visually amazing ad campaign, but if your product does not provide immense value to your customers, you will fail in the long term. So I went back to the drawing board researching products. This time I focused on products that would actually solve an issue with the customer and provide value. I was testing a ton of different products during this time. A manual wireless coffee maker, an automatic pet feeder machine, bottle warmers, baby mats, dog beds, period cramp relief devices, and everything in between. But after a while, I came across a company that was very popular in the US and one in Australia as well. It sold weighted blankets. I recognized a hole in the Scandinavian market for these weighted blankets, so I read up on some studies and found that weighted blankets have a lot of benefits. And so I created Scandinavian Rest. And already on the first day I had orders, and before long I was doing around 700 euros in revenue daily. This was all on pre-order, so I ordered home a batch of 60 blankets, which at the time was a huge investment for me. It was quite anxiety inducing because I didn't know if I would be able to sell them. Thankfully I did, but it did not come easy. During this time I was working 7 hours a day and I was completely isolated. But I always had the feeling that if I didn't utilize this opportunity to the fullest, I would not have been able to live with myself, honestly. I constantly felt like this was my time and I had to capitalize on it. So everything was actually going really well, and my first Black Friday sale was a huge success. I sold out my entire stock and I felt on top of the world. But the Black Friday success quickly turned into a Christmas disaster. Because the large demand on Black Friday, we didn't have enough blankets in stock for Christmas. And there wasn't either enough time for me to order anymore. I had about 150 customers that were about to be left disappointed. Then my mother actually came up with the idea of sending out physical Christmas cards to the 150 customers so they at least had something to put under the tree. And so I spent ages handwriting 150 Christmas cards, and I remember being at the post office stamping all these cards and people were looking at me like I was crazy. In the end, thankfully a lot of customers actually appreciated the gesture and the crisis was mostly averted. I kept scaling the store and it came to a point where I felt I had done all the optimization that I was capable of by myself. Things were almost running themselves and I suddenly had a lot more time on my hands, so I decided to spend that time creating another e-commerce brand. I kept working on both stores, but as they grew, the workload grew with them. Because I was inexperienced, I didn't know how to scale the organization as we got more and more orders. Especially the customer service part became too much for me in the end. I remember a specific time when I had a deadline to design some packaging for the next day. Customers kept writing and I had a hard time getting the design right simultaneously. There were so many messages that I couldn't possibly answer them all. I sat in my room all day, designing the packaging and answering the emails. The stress built up and by the end of the day, I got a 1-star Trustpilot review and everything boiled over. I screamed and shouted in anger and frustration. It was sort of a breakdown that I had never experienced before. I reflected on it and I spoke with my parents about it and they told me, Nikolai, you have to get help. Therefore, I hired someone to take care of the customer service and it made a world of difference. This experience really taught me the importance of delegating. I thought I could do everything myself, but obviously I couldn't. Getting competent people to help you and building a team is one of the most important parts of scaling a business. I've now done nearly 15 million euros in revenue in a time span of 2.5 years. It's been a bumpy road so far and I still encounter bumps all the time. 1.5 years ago, I even drove 2 hours to check on our stock only to find out that we had been sent 1,000 units of wrong blankets. But issues like this occur in business all the time and you have to work through them. I now finally feel like I've cracked the code. I'm able to live the life of my dreams by traveling all over the world while making money. This year I've so far been to 11 countries with my friends, family and girlfriend, and I've done over 10 million euros in revenue. And the future is looking really exciting. Therefore, I want to start sharing my knowledge and take you along the road with me. Because like I told you, I was once just like you, watching YouTube videos trying to realize my dream. And if I can end this video by giving some advice, it would be to always, no matter what, keep learning, keep trying, no matter how many times you fail. And most importantly, enjoy the journey because it will all be worth it in the end.